Hey, what's up? Hello everyone, welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl. It is Barbenheimer week here on the channel, so we're talking all things Barbie, all things Oppenheimer. We've done a Barbie draft, an Oppenheimer Christopher Nolan tier list. We had a Barbie review, so now it is time to talk and discuss Christopher Nolan's newest film, Oppenheimer. But before we can dive into that, we have a very fun game coming to the channel next month. So Matt, take it away. Tell everyone out there how they can get involved.
You're going to want to join our game of Fantasy Filmball. And Fantasy Filmball is not just a game we play on this channel. It is a game that all of you guys can play too if you join our Discord in the description down below. In this game, you draft a team of 10 different movies, which will gain points through the awards season to come. So if you want to get Oppenheimer on your team, join the Discord in the description down below and register for our league before August 15th. It is free to play. It is very fun if you are an awards season junkie like us. Now let's talk about Christopher Nolan's new movie, which many people are calling Christopher Nolan's magnum opus. People are saying that this is one of the best things that he's ever made, if not the best. Dylan, what are your initial impressions of Oppenheimer?
So I'm very fresh out of this movie. My screening was at 11 p.m. last night. It ended at about 2:30 in the morning. I got home at 3. I went to sleep around 4, and we're recording this about 10 or 11 in the morning. So it's very, very soon after. These are raw initial thoughts. And honestly, it's kind of hard to put stuff together. This movie is very raw. It is very intense, thrilling, gripping, and haunting. Cillian Murphy really delivered in the leading role. You can see the despair in his eyes, and it's very much not a vocal performance where it is a physical performance. You can tell he's mixed on everything that he's doing throughout the whole movie, and he is a man on a mission, as well as the rest of this ensemble. Robert Downey Jr. is great, as everyone has been talking about. He has some very big scene-stealing moments. This cast is like 30 people deep. I could go name by name and just say, this person's great in their scene, this person's great in their scene. The technicals of this movie are immaculate. I know there's this whole discussion of Dune or Oppenheimer, sound editing, who's winning it, and at least Dune has a very high bar to clear after this movie, because let alone the bomb sequences, is multiple times throughout this movie you get a step into Oppenheimer's mind, and it's like a quick jolt of an explosion where the sound and just the quick cross-cutting nature of this movie are on full force. And I don't know, I feel like I could just ramble on and on about everything this movie gets right. So before I do that even more, I'll hand it over to you for some of your initial thoughts.
Well, I liked it quite a bit, but I felt underwhelmed, and that tends to happen when I walk out of an 8 out of 10 movie that every single other person that I know gave a 10 out of 10. Christopher Nolan is a masterful filmmaker, evidently, because this film fires on all cylinders, but I felt absolutely zero emotions for about 95% of this movie. There were 2 scenes where I felt moved. Otherwise, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel haunted. I didn't feel thrilled. I didn't feel joy, sorrow, anxiety, anything, except for 2 sequences. And those were the sequences, the 10 minutes after the Trinity test. The weight of the film really hit me for 10 minutes, and then it went back to nothing. And then the very ending of the movie floored me. But we're going to talk about that later. I won't talk about it now. And I felt that while so many of the technical elements were really well done, some of it didn't quite click for me. I found, personally, Ludwig Göransson's score to be really overbearing, like an oppressive wall of sound that lacked coherent themes. The sound was atmospheric and it built a feeling, but at the same time, that feeling wasn't something I was really loving. I thought that the use of synths in it, while very fitting for the fact that Oppenheimer is a scientist dealing with the creation of the atom bomb, I thought it was very dated. I don't like synths. It felt very 80s to me in the music in a way that I don't really love. I'll let you talk about this now, Dylan, actually, because I know you really love Ludwig Göransson's score here. What was I missing?
At least for me, I really love the inclusion of strings with the score and how it adds like a whole new level, because like we had Göransson and Nolan collaborate in the past with Tenet, where it's a very bold, innovative, in-your-face type of score, and this one is not really that. It draws it back a little bit. It's not dominating the sequences like the score in Tenet did, and this one I feel like elevated inside the movie. I've listened to it some outside, and it's not as memorable, not as catchy, but inside the movie I feel like it very much elevates a lot of the scenes and adds extra weight, extra emotion, and extra power to everything that's involved in, whether it is the removal of the score in some sequences or the addition to it. And I don't know. I know score is something that is very subjective because there's some people who adore some scores where other people completely hate. Just go to last year of All Quiet on the Western Front. I know you and I are big fans of that score, and the majority of people are like, this score stinks. And then the Academy are like, no, we love this score too. So it's something that's very subjective. But for me, the score here added to the film overall.
The cinematography I thought was pretty good. It was exceptional in some sequences. I think the high point of the movie for me is the editing between sequences. The way that it cuts between timelines, between perspectives, with the black and white being the Robert Downey Jr. story and the color being the way that Cillian Murphy is seeing how this all plays out. Really, really interesting, and the way that it cuts was so strong. I would be completely in favor of this winning an Oscar for editing. It was beautifully done. But that said, I do think the first act was a little bit too airy in how it cut sometimes. But yeah, the timeline hopping that happens later in the movie is fantastic. This film reminded me a lot more of The Imitation Game than I think a lot of people are going to want to admit. I liked it. I was still a little bit disappointed. Something I was not disappointed in were the performances. This was a very strong showcase of the actors. Now, many people were expecting Cillian Murphy to steal the show and walk away with an Oscar for this, but it seems like a lot of the reviews are really heavily focusing on Robert Downey Jr. People just seem to be fawning over his work in this movie. So I know you talked about it a little bit, but was there anyone else that really stood out in the ensemble to you?
I guess just to talk about our big two first a little bit. Cillian Murphy, I think, is worth all the praise here. He would be my main standout, partially because he's on screen for like 95% of this movie. The whole movie falls on his shoulders. We don't buy Cillian Murphy, the whole movie crumbles. Robert Downey Jr. is great. I also think part of that's coming to everyone who loves him. We all think he's great. We love his personality, and then that's carrying over here. It's like, oh, he's great. This is his first great role in a long time, so let's hype him up a little bit. I think he's great. I just don't think he's the standout that everyone's saying. I thought that Matt Damon was pretty good in his limited screen time here. Whenever he popped up, he had a lot of energy, brevity, life, and the cameos in this movie were all great as well. Casey Affleck comes in, demolishes that one scene. Rami Malek has probably the most integral scene of the movie. Benny Safdie also is someone who isn't given a lot to do here, but when he is on screen, you can feel the weight and you can feel everything that character's trying to get done that isn't getting done. You can see how it's building up over time to lead to the eventual turn that character does take on Oppenheimer. Florence Pugh is great in the few scenes that she gets. I don't really like the direction that character goes. I know that's like historically accurate. It just didn't really come across very well. And for Emily Blunt, there's specific moments that she really gets to shine. Just her introduction scenes are kind of slow. So like when I first saw this movie last night, everyone I had seen like leading up to it's like, oh my gosh, Emily Blunt needs to be an Oscar nominee. And for the majority of the movie, I'm like, she's kind of just here. And then you get those two scenes like, okay, I get it now. But like those scenes come very late into the movie.
I have to agree with the Emily Blunt stuff there. She has two great scenes, but as always, Nolan really struggles to write women. Emily Blunt is just the housewife for 90% of this movie, and then she gets two good scenes near the very end, and otherwise she is so shafted by this role. To talk about the main two, Robert Downey Jr. was personally my standout. I thought he was perfectly cast. He was a charismatic snake whose narcissism becomes his downfall. It kind of took the character of like a Tony Stark type. It took that character and made him into someone who was disguising his charisma behind this sort of smugness. I really love that. I like that they framed the story as sort of like a Mozart Salieri story from the movie Amadeus, where one person seeks to destroy another person for the perceived slight of being better than them. He just tore Oppenheimer to shreds because of what? Because he thought that one time he'd said something negative to Einstein about him. Because Oppenheimer dared to say that the H-bomb program might be dangerous and might do more harm than good in the world. The way that this arc plays out is so satisfying. Robert Downey Jr. does the role about as well as he has ever acted in his life. It's probably not going to be my favorite in the supporting actor category at the end of the year, but I think he is so worthy of the attention he's getting for this role. But to shout out some smaller ensemble members here, Benny Safdie, I thought was a very strong standout here. His character really embodied the theme that genius is only as useful as it is naive, because he is so focused on innovation that he is willing to betray anyone who stands in his way. Now, where this movie shined the brightest for me was the themes. Even though I might have been a little bit disappointed by a lot of aspects of it, I left the theater thinking about so many different things. There's so much on its mind. Powerful people with nothing to offer will exploit the brilliant and throw them away when they no longer prove to be useful. All these politicians have nothing at all to offer, and they see that these scientists are capable of greatness, and they take advantage of that. As well, there's a lot of themes about the tunnel vision of technological progress, thinking so much about what can be done that no one ever stops to think of should that thing be done. Something that I've seen a lot of people criticize here is like, oh, it's a movie about how people made an atom bomb and then didn't realize that they were gonna feel sad afterwards. I totally disagree with that. I think this movie is about how genius creates tunnel vision, and these people were so focused on technological advancements that they didn't even stop to consider that there was a real human impact. Theory versus reality. Theory is numbers on a page, but reality is so much more. Calculations and algorithms are cold and unfeeling, but life is emotional, and life is a different reality than just the cold, hard facts. And it kind of spoke to me in like a sense of AI. We're thinking so much about algorithms while we might be barreling towards disaster because this has unimaginable impacts, but no one's focused on the impacts. They're focused on, can this happen? Can we do this? Not should we do this?
I mean, I think you bring up a very interesting discussion about all the people who are saying on like, oh, they didn't feel any remorse during making the bomb, when at least to me it read the whole time no one there wanted to be doing this. They were just doing it because it was an order. At least for Oppenheimer, he was doing it because he knew if he didn't, the opposition would, and the opposition would then use it against them. And he even said like, we shouldn't drop this sort of thing. So I think that sparks an interesting debate as well. But I think there's a lot of interesting themes here that are on a grand scale and a smaller scale too, because it also comes down to how you manage relationships, of how Oppenheimer was always trying to progress in his career, but his at-home life was always going backwards, whether it was dealing with one partner, cheating to the another, then not being able to even raise your child, and then cheating on that partner again. It could be the smartest or the most creative person in the world, but you still aren't a perfect human at the end of the day. As well as what you're talking about before with Robert Downey Jr.'s character of pettiness, and how some people will go to the furthest extent to just get what they want and to make other people pay. And you could say that's the same thing about America using the bomb. Robert Downey Jr.'s character had already won in this movie. Oppenheimer was already out of a position of power, but he kept having to push further and further to make sure his life was ruined, as America did with the bomb to Japan. There's parts of this movie I wish were longer. Like, I wish the very end of the movie was a little bit longer, but we flash forward to see Oppenheimer basically re-evaluated by the public and getting his award, as well as the introduction to his character when he's overseas with his studies. I feel like those two parts of the movie were a little bit brushed through too quick, but I fully get because it fits into the story. But I also agree, the final moments of the movie where Oppenheimer talks with Einstein, we find out what the discussion was actually about and the ramifications of it, that not just in this movie, but for the world, the real world that we live in as a whole.
The ending shook me to the fucking core. I think that this might be one of the best finales Christopher Nolan has ever done, because we've seen that scene with Einstein probably 4 or 5 times through the movie, and it was this really horrifying observation that almost moved me to tears. After 3 hours of basically feeling nothing, that final line shook me.
I really want to watch this movie again, which I will be doing very shortly. I'll get to see in 70mm, which is super exciting.
That's
but
awesome.
To get a better grasp of just how to interpret a lot of what this movie is saying, because at least on initial viewing, as I mentioned before, I was thrilled. I was gripped. My eyes never left the screen. It was a 3-hour movie that felt like an hour. So like, I really want to go watch it again now that I know what this movie has to say, is hearing it say it again to pick up on more things throughout.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, but what other moments in this movie very much like blew you away?
Like I said earlier, there's the 10 minutes after the Trinity test, when it really hits Oppenheimer that he only for the first time realizes what his work has done. You said earlier something I kind of disagree with, which is that the scientists don't want to be making this. They're just doing it because they've been ordered to, and they know that if they don't, the enemy will. I'm not sure if I buy that as much as I think that they're excited to be making something that feels like scientific progress. They're excited to build a legacy. I think a lot of this movie is about how men and their pride will lead them to do horrible things just to be remembered. And in this, I think that the scientists, they're not thinking of this as a bomb that will kill people. They're thinking of this as a technological achievement that will put them in the history books. So yeah, the 10 minutes after the Trinity test, where Oppenheimer sees, oh my God, we made something that can destroy the world. Seeing him blankly yelling patriotic things to a crowd while people lift him up on a chair and cheer for him while he knows that he has doomed the world. Additionally, The moment in the Trinity test where everything goes silent and the bomb goes off, brilliance. What a moment. And I'd also say there's a moment, I think this is in the sequence after the Trinity test. They're talking about where should we drop the bomb. The way that they discuss it feels like they're talking about a game of Risk instead of a real war. They see it as numbers on a page, the same way that Oppenheimer and all of the scientists didn't see the bomb as an actual bomb that was going to kill people. They saw it as calculations and algorithms. Yeah, really cutting moments right there. What moment stood out for you?
For that moment when they're discussing whether they should drop the bomb, I think that scene is very chilling and very haunting, because you just see, like, as you were talking about how nonchalant they kind of are about it. And even one of the people in the room says, like, oh yeah, I'm taking this place off the list because, like, I've gone there on vacation and it's nice. That was very chilling. And even the people around me in the theater, you could audibly hear like disgust and groans from that comment. And then going to the physical test itself, that moment of silence, you would expect Nolan to play a score there, but instead it's just completely blank. And I can't remember how long, it felt like 30 seconds. You could feel the weight of this bomb just exploding. And while this scene may not be the best one, it definitely is a moment that sticks with you, is when Oppenheimer is with Florence Pugh's character talking in the bed, and she asks him to read a line off of a book. That is a transition and it's a transition that will stay with you for a while after watching this movie.
Yeah, that scene's memorable.
I appreciate its boldness, but yeah, that would be one of my, like, maybe we could have done something a little bit different, but it definitely took the risk, so I'll give it that at least.
But anyways, we've talked about our thoughts on the movie. Now let's talk about its box office performance. And I was way off on Barbie. I was way off on Oppenheimer. This is set to be bigger than Dunkirk. What do you think it is that's drawing audiences out to see a 3-hour courtroom biopic about the creation of the atom bomb?
You don't have to feel bad, because everyone was wrong about both these movies. Just going back a month ago, right before we did our initial July high-low game, Oppenheimer was projected for about like 25 to 35 million, and Barbie was for 35 to 50 million. Both of those movies not only doubled, but nearly tripled that for their opening weekend. And I think part of it does go to the whole zeitgeist of, you have to see Barbie and Oppenheimer on the same weekend, as well as both these movies have rave reviews. Critics love them. Audiences are loving them, which for Oppenheimer is specifically, like, shocking. Not that Nolan doesn't make crowd-pleasing movies, but this does not seem to be a movie that the general audience would flock to and be like, you need to go see that. That just speaks to just the state of where we're at the box office now. People are clamoring for movies they actually want to see. We've seen big tentpole blockbusters flop. The Flash, Fast X, Dial of Destiny, Transformers. They're just not getting the butts in the seats. While they're opening big, they're not opening big for their budget. While Oppenheimer put up the same opening weekend as all those and cost like a third of the price. It's awe-inspiring, and I think part of it comes down to like the word of mouth, as well as Nolan being who he is, and he's driving butts to the seats. We saw it during the pandemic with Tenet, and then Oppenheimer here, it looks like it could make 5+ million worldwide at the end of its run, which does not make any sense on paper. But yes, event cinema, it's back. We love it. Barbie, Oppenheimer, going back to last year with Minions. When you can dress up to go to the movies, it adds a whole new sense of community. You go to the theater yesterday, you have men in suits, women in suits, people in pink. It's crazy. It's fun. It's great.
People want a draw to go and see something, and what they want is something that looks like something they could not experience on their phone. They want to be drawn to something unique. But now let's talk Oscar chances. This one sure looks to me like it could be a Best Picture front runner. This is a film that has incredible technical potential as well as winning potential above the line. I would say that this is actually in winning contention for picture, director, actor, supporting actor, adapted screenplay, cinematography, score, sound, and editing. It could win 9 Oscars. I don't think it will win all of those, but it is in the conversation to win 9. That is fucking crazy. Now, I don't think it will win all of those, but I think it will win supporting actor, adapted screenplay, score, sound, editing. So 5. I got 5 right now. That is nuts that it can do that. And maybe even director. It could win director too. But if it wins director and screenplay, it kind of has to win picture. This feels like a top 2 movie to me, in the same way that 1917 was a top 2 movie, that Power of the Dog was a top 2 movie, that Roma was a top 2 movie, Gravity. I could go on and on. Last year, you could make an argument that it was either All Quiet or it was Banshees, one of those two, but it wasn't clear what number 2 was. This is a constant thing where we see a big, more dark, serious auteur movie as the runner-up. That might be a little bit colder in comparison to the warmer winner eventually. What do you think about that?
I think this could perform where it does win Best Picture, because we eventually are going to need a break of the fun, lighthearted movie winning and the bigger budget auteur movies losing. But if it doesn't win, I think this could perform like combining both Gravity and 1917, where this does take home director, this does take home text, but also hits a lot of categories where it comes up short. Because you mentioned 9 categories that could win. That's not even including possible nominations in visual effects, production design, costumes, supporting actress, makeup. Obviously, it's not hitting all of those, but those are other ones where it's at least in the 10. So like, this movie has a chance to set records in terms of nominations. Will it? No, because that's not the academy that we're in nowadays. But it has the potential to hit all those categories. And then when you chop that up a little bit further, you just said yourself, there's a chance for 9 wins here. It's not going to win 9, but there's a chance for 9 wins. So this is a behemoth. There's no way this misses at least above the line stuff. I know there's like years past, like a movie like this comes out early, we all believe in it, and then it dies out. But Oppenheimer is not going to be the movie that dies out.
This one has a benefit of it's not going to suffer from frontrunner fatigue, because everyone still is going to say that Killers of the Flower Moon is the frontrunner until December. And then this is going to win the Golden Globes, and people are going to say, oh, could Oppenheimer be the frontrunner? And that's when its frontrunner status is going to start. So yeah, I think that this is a strong contender to be the nominations leader. And while I don't think that this is going to win Best Picture, I think something else will come in and take that slot. I do think it wins either director or adapted screenplay.
This is still going to be a behemoth in the Fantasy Filmball draft. So our draft is approaching, as Matt talked about at the beginning of this video. The link is in the description to sign up to join the Discord, and then go over to the League Placements channel to sign up for a roster spot. But where should you draft Oppenheimer? Because I think it's pretty clear. This is 1-1. First overall pick. I think it should be first overall pick across the board.
I say it's first overall pick too. You could argue Killers of the Flower Moon could be your first pick. The thing with Oppenheimer is we know it has a massive point ceiling from how many nominations it could score, from how many wins it could score, and it still has a very high floor. This is going to probably get between 1,500 to 2,500 points. And last year, Everything Ever All at Once ended up around like 2,300, 2,400 points. So you're going to see this probably score around that, which is why I would recommend this being your first overall pick, especially because if you do take Killers of the Flower Moon first overall, that doesn't have as much winning potential as this does. So it might be a solid nominee, but Oppenheimer can win multiple of these categories.
I would agree with that as well. And sadly, in our league, I don't have the first overall pick.
And
you do.
I
so
do.
I have the fun debate of what do I take at the number 3 slot, because there's 3 movies and 2 of them might not even come out this year.
Well, what we gotta hope is that Film Drunk takes Past Lives.
Shh. Don't let the people hear that. Don't let the people hear that. But this is the end of our discussion. Would love to hear what your thoughts are on the movie down below. Consider dropping a subscription, because this week we're releasing all the Barbie and Oppenheimer content, as well as new content for the Oscars each and every week. But until then, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.